I have fixed a lot of things in my life. Water heaters, roof sections, a cracked foundation on a rental property I bought in 2001 that everyone told me was not worth saving. I have rewired a detached garage, replaced a heat exchanger on a furnace in February with the temperature outside sitting at 11 degrees, and once spent an entire Labor Day weekend replacing the subfloor in a bathroom because I found soft spots near the toilet and decided that afternoon I was going to deal with it properly. I did not call anyone for any of those jobs. Not because I was trying to prove something. Because I understood how the thing worked. And understanding how something works means you have a relationship with it. A man who just owns a thing and calls someone else every time it needs attention. That man never really knows what he has. I did not expect my hip to need fixing at 67 years old. I should have. I spent 3 decades walking construction sites, climbing in and out of utility trenches, and standing on concrete floors for 8 and 10 hours at a stretch. And if you do that long enough, your body eventually presents you with an invoice. Mine came in February, in the form of a grinding sensation on the left side that was bad enough by April that I was walking with compensating lean. I didn't even notice until my neighbor Dennis pointed out one morning when I was getting the mail. He said, "Gerald, you're listing." I told him I wasn't. He said, "You're listing." He was right. My name is Gerald Macon. I am 67 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, on the east side, in a house I bought in 1989 for a price I won't share because it will make you either laugh or grind your teeth, depending on your own situation with real estate. I worked for 31 years as a structural engineer for a civil infrastructure firm. Bridges, drainage systems, load-bearing assessments for public works projects across central Ohio. I retired at 62. I did not retire because I was tired of the work. I retired because Dora was sick, and because 31 years is long enough to know when a chapter is finished. I spend my mornings now doing what I have always done. Coffee, reading, and thinking slowly and carefully about things that other people think they've already figured out. I drive a 2009 Chevrolet Silverado with 212,000 miles on it that I maintain myself. It runs perfectly. It will run perfectly for another 50,000 miles because I treat it the way I treat everything, with attention, consistency, and no tolerance for ignoring a small problem until it becomes a large one. I have 3 children. I want to introduce them properly because this story is about them, and because the specific shape of who they are matters to what happened. Raymond is my oldest. He is 43 years old. He lives 12 minutes from my house, which I know because I have driven it. He works in commercial insurance on the sales side, not the actuarial end, not the claims end, the end where you take people to lunch and tell them about coverage packages. Raymond is good at that. He has always been good at the performance of sincerity, which is not the same thing as sincerity itself, though I spent a long time, longer than I should have, confusing the two. He is not a dishonest man. He is a man who has spent his whole life believing that saying the right thing and doing the right thing are essentially the same act, and he has gotten far enough on that belief that he has never really had to examine it. Denise is my middle child. She is 40 years old. She lives in Westerville, 20 minutes north. Denise is a family organizer, the one who sets up the shared calendars, sends the birthday reminders, coordinates the holiday dinners, and runs the family group chat with the brisk efficiency of someone who has decided that logistics are a form of love. She is not wrong. Exactly. But there's a particular way that some people use the management of the situation as a substitute for being present in it. And Denise has been doing that her whole adult life, without anyone ever saying it plainly to her face. Carl is my youngest. He is 37. He lives in Hilliard, 25 minutes west on a good traffic day. Carl runs a landscaping business. 3 crews, 11 employees, and more accounts than he can comfortably handle in peak season, which he knows and has known for 2 years and has not fully addressed because Carl, like me, has a stubborn streak that makes him reluctant to admit when a system needs redesigning. He has my hands and my habits and the same particular silence I use when I'm working something out. I have always believed he understood me best of the 3. I still believe that. What happened did not change that belief. It deepened it. Actually, in a way that is hard to explain without getting ahead of the story. Dora passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came on a Thursday in October, and she was gone 7 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning in December. With me sitting in the recliner, I had moved next to her hospital bed, the one we had brought into the living room when the stairs became too much, and holding her hand. I will not spend more time on that. It is not what the story is about. But I want you to understand the specific shape of the life I have been living since then, because context is not decoration. Context is structure. And a man who has spent 41 years building something with another person and then has to figure out how to live in the absence of that person, that man learns very quickly which parts of his life were actually holding weight and which parts were simply filling space. The hip surgery was scheduled for June 9th, a Monday, 7:15 in the morning, at Ohio Health Riverside Methodist Hospital. The surgeon was Dr. Marcus Webb, 42 years old, composed with the specific confidence of a man who had done this procedure many hundreds of times and no longer found it remarkable, which I found reassuring rather than dismissive. He told me it was very routine. I nodded and told him I understood. I understand routine. Routine is not the absence of precision. Routine is what precision becomes when it has been practiced long enough to stop requiring effort. I told my children over dinner on a Sunday in May 18th. They came to the house, all three of them, and I made a pot roast because it was what Dora would have made for that kind of occasion, and because I am 67 years old and I know how to make a pot roast. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told them about the hip, about Dr. Webb, about the surgery date. Raymond said, without hesitation, "Dad, we will set up a rotation. Don't even think about it." He said it with the full, easy confidence of a man who means what he says in that exact moment. Denise pulled her phone out and started talking about a shared calendar. She said she would coordinate the schedule and send everyone their days. Carl said, "I'll take the first week." "Dad, I've got you." No question. I looked at the three of them around that table, my three children, adults with their own lives and their own complications, talking about how they were going to take care of me. And I felt something warm and uncomplicated that I do not feel very often anymore. That was May 18th. I remember it clearly. I want to remember it clearly, because the specific distance between what was said at that table and what actually happened is the whole point of the story. The surgery was June 9th. I drove myself to the hospital at 6 a.m. in the Silverado, parked in a long-term structure, and checked myself in. I had arranged that. I did not need someone to drive me. The procedure took 2 hours and 50 minutes. Dr. Webb came out afterward and told me it had gone exactly as planned. I was in my room by 12:30 p.m. Raymond texted at 2:14 p.m. The message said, "Thinking of you, Dad. Rest up yourself. We'll be by." I read it twice. I set the phone down on the bedside table, and I looked at the ceiling for a moment, which is a thing I do when I am deciding how to interpret something charitably. Denise called at 6:47 p.m. She asked how the surgery went. I told her it went fine. She said the calendar was confirmed, and she was checking with Carl that he had the first 2 days. She said she had a morning meeting Tuesday, but would try to come Wednesday. I told her that was fine. She said she would text before she came. I told her okay. Carl did not call that day. June is his busiest month. 3 crews in the ground, accounts stacked up, and the kind of scheduling pressure that turns a man's week into a sequence of problems to solve before the next wave arrives. I understood that. I went to sleep at 8:30 p.m. in a hospital bed that was not designed for comfort and slept well enough. Day 2, Tuesday, June 10th. Physical therapy began at 8 a.m. with a woman named Renee Collier, who had the focused, relentless energy of someone who had decided early in her career that patients were going to heal on her schedule, and that was simply how it was going to be. I liked her immediately. By 10:30, I had walked 40 feet with a walker. By early afternoon, I was back in the room. No visitors. Raymond sent a thumbs-up emoji in the family group chat in response to a message Denise had sent. Carl posted nothing. I read for 2 hours and went to sleep before 9. Wednesday, June 11th. Renee had me on the stairs by late morning. I managed 8 steps up and 8 steps down, which she said was strong for day 3. A nurse on my floor. Patricia, a woman in her mid-50s with the unhurried competence of someone who's been doing this work long enough that it has stopped being a job and become something closer to a practice, asked me that afternoon if I wanted her to add any names to the visitor contact sheet. I told her I had 3 children who would be coming. She wrote down their names. She nodded without any particular expression, and went back to her work. No visitors Wednesday. I read and slept and watched the light change on the wall across from my window. Thursday, June 12th. I walked the full length of my hallway for the first time. Renee said I was ahead of schedule. I told her I did not know how to be behind it. She laughed. Patricia came in for the evening check and asked how I was feeling. I told her good. She said my children hadn't called the nurse's station. I told her they had my cell number. She said, "Yes, sir," and checked my chart and left. Friday the 13th, Saturday. Sunday. The family group chat was active 27 messages over those 3 days. There was a long conversation about a restaurant Raymond had been to in Dublin. There was a video of Denise's youngest at a swimming lesson. There was a discussion of a television series I have never watched. My name appeared twice. Once when Denise wrote, "Hope Dad is healing up okay," with a smiley face, and once when Raymond replied with same. Carl did not post either day. I did not reply to any of it. I kept reading the TVA history. I finished it Saturday night and started a book about the engineering of the Panama Canal that I had been meaning to get to for 3 years. The hospital cafeteria sent up a tray 3 times a day. Patricia or one of the other nurses checked on me at regular intervals with the steady, professional care of people doing their jobs well. That is what I had. And I want to be honest about something, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story like this worth telling. I was not devastated. I was not broken. I am 67 years old, and I have been through enough that I know the difference between pain that surprises you and pain that simply confirms something you've been refusing to look at directly. What I felt, lying in that hospital room in the long quiet of those first 9 days, was a specific cold clarity of a man who has finally stopped making excuses for a structure that isn't holding. I have been making those excuses for years. Since Dora died. Since before Dora died, if I am being fully honest, which I am trying to be. I told myself my children were busy. I told myself that the way they showed up, or didn't show up, was a function of their lives and their schedules and the complicated geometry of adult children with families of their own. I told myself that love does not always look like presence. That is true. I still believe it. But there is a version of that truth that a man uses to protect himself from a harder truth, and I had been using it for 4 years, and lying in that room with 11 days accumulating one by one, I was done. Monday, June 16th, 1 week post-surgery. I called Raymond at 9:22 a.m. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. "Raymond, it's your father. Give me a call when you get a chance." He texted back 43 minutes later. "All good, Dad? Sorry at a thing. Call later." He did not call later that day. He did not call the day after either. I am not a dramatic man. I want you to understand that. I have never slammed a door in anger in my life. I have never delivered a speech about what someone owed me. I have never, in 67 years, made a scene. What I do instead, what I have always done, is think, carefully, slowly, and without the distortion that anger introduces when you let it run the process. I sat in that hospital room on the evening of June 16th, and I thought about what I knew, not what I felt, not what I hoped, but what I actually knew based on the evidence in front of me. What I knew was this. I had 3 children within 30 minutes of my hospital room. I had been in that room for 8 days. Not one of them had come. Not one of them had called the nurse's station. 2 of them had sent text messages. The group chat had 27 messages, none of which were about whether their father needed anything. And the surgery they had all sat at my kitchen table and promised to show up for, was a hip replacement, not a hangnail. It was a real thing, a recovery with a real timeline and real physical requirements, and the kind of vulnerability that a man who has been self-sufficient for 4 decades does not find easy to acknowledge even when it's necessary. Something in me went very still that evening, cold and quiet and completely settled. Not a snap. I want to be careful about that word because it implies something reactive, and what happened inside me was not reactive. It was conclusive. The way a calculation becomes conclusive when you've checked the numbers 3 times and they keep coming out the same way. I let myself sit with it for a moment. Then I opened the contacts on my phone. I called Douglas Fenn at 7:18 p.m. Douglas has been my attorney for 19 years. He is 61, compact in the way of a man who has always moved efficiently, with a particular precision of speech that good attorneys develop over decades, not because they are performing precision, but because they have learned through experience that every unnecessary word is a potential liability. He has handled 2 estate revisions for me, a property boundary dispute in 2008 that involved a neighbor who turned out to be significantly less reasonable than he appeared, and the trust documentation I put in place the year after Dora passed. He answered on the second ring. "Gerald," he said, "Douglas, I need to meet with you this week. I'm at Riverside Methodist, room 412. Can you come here?" A short pause, not hesitation, just Douglas moving his calendar around his head the way he does before he commits to anything. "Thursday," he said, 2 o'clock. "Good," I said. "Bring the current will and the trust summary." A slightly longer pause this time. "Direction?" "Yes," I said. "A different one." "Thursday at 2, he said, and that was the end of the call. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Tuesday, June 17th, Day 9. Renee pushed me hard in the morning session. Full hallway twice. Stairs with less assistance than the previous days, and a set of exercises in a room that she cheerfully described as the boring part that matters most. I did all of it. Patricia came in at 7:45 a.m. for vitals and asked me how I'd slept. I told her fine. She checked the chart and then looked at me with the direct, unsentimental gaze of a woman who has spent enough years in hospitals to have lost the habit of pretending not to notice things. "Your contact list still shows 3 family members," she said. "None of them have called the station." "I know," I said. She wrote something in the chart. She did not offer an opinion. I respected that more than I can say. Denise called that afternoon at 3:40 p.m. She said she had been meaning to call. She asked how the recovery was going. I told her Renee said I was ahead of schedule. I could hear the relief in her exhale, the specific exhale of a person who expected more resistance than they got. "I've been trying to figure out when to come by," she said. "This week has been..." "Denise," I said. "Yeah, it's all right." Another exhale, longer this time. She said she would try to come Friday, before discharge. I told her not to worry about it. She said she'd see me soon. I told her the same. Carl called Wednesday evening at 8:09 p.m. He sounded the way Carl always sounds in June, stretched thin and operating on whatever is left after the day takes its portion. "Dad, I'm sorry I haven't been there." "You've been busy," I said. "It's been a hard month. Scheduling has been a nightmare, and I lost a foreman last week, and..." "Carl," I said. "Yeah, I know." A long pause. The kind Carl uses when he's weighing what to say against what he actually means. "How are you really?" he said. "Hip is healing right on schedule," I said. I walked the full hallway. "Stairs are coming along. I'll be out of here Friday or Saturday." "I'm coming Friday," he said, "before you're discharged." "Carl," I said, "you don't have to do that." "Dad, come by the house Saturday. We'll have coffee." He said okay. He said he'd be there Saturday. He said he was sorry. I told him there was nothing to be sorry about. I said it the way I have learned to say things I do not entirely mean, but that serve the moment better than the alternative. Carl went quiet for a moment before he hung up, that long, measuring quiet is, and I think he heard what I wasn't saying because he always does. Thursday, June 19th. Douglas arrived at 2:02 p.m. in a gray suit with a leather portfolio that I recognized from the 2021 trust work. He shook my hand, pulled the chair to the bedside table, and opened the portfolio without any of the preliminary conversation that some attorneys use to make you feel comfortable before they get to the thing you actually call them about. Douglas does not do that. He knows I did not call him for conversation. He walked me through everything. The current will, the one Dora and I had both executed in 2018, revised after her passing to remove her as beneficiary and restructure the distributions. The trust documentation, which holds the house, the primary investment account, and a separate liquidity account I had established in 2021 that my children have never been told about and have no reason to expect. Douglas is thorough in a way that is not performative. He goes through every page because he believes you should understand exactly what you have before you decide to change it. When he finished, he closed the folder and looked at me. "What are we changing?" he said. I told him, "I will not give you every detail of what was said in that room over the next hour. Some of it is private in the way that financial documents are private, and some of it is private in the way that the specific arithmetic of a man's disappointment is private. It belongs to him, not to the telling of his story. But I will tell you the shape of it. The original distributed the estate in 3 equal portions. 1 to Raymond, 1 to Denise, 1 to Carl. That was what Dora and I had agreed on when we wrote it, and it reflected what we believed then, which was that equal distribution was the fairest expression of equal love. I still believe in equal love. What I have revised is my understanding of what equal means when the people involved are not equivalent in what they have demonstrated. Douglas asked his questions. They were practical, structural, and clean. The questions of a man who is not there to talk you out of anything, but who needs to understand the architecture before he builds something new. He asked about conditions versus outright adjustments. He asked about timing and whether I wanted notification clauses. He asked about the trust separately from the will, because they are separate instruments with different mechanics, and conflating them would be an error. I answered everything. It took 40 minutes. At the end of it, Douglas went to the small desk in the corner of the room with his laptop and prepared the revised documents. Patricia came in twice during that time, once for scheduled vitals, and once to leave a glass of water on the table that I hadn't asked for but appreciated. She glanced at Douglas once, at the laptop screen once, and at me once, and then she went about her work without a word, which is exactly what I would expect from Patricia Okafor. At 3:58 p.m., Douglas placed 2 documents on a rolling table in front of me. I read them completely. Not a skim, a full read, every paragraph, every clause, every defined term. I have signed enough documents in my professional life to know that the only person responsible for understanding what you're putting your name to is the person holding the pen. It took me 16 minutes. Douglas waited in the corner chair with the patience of a man who has sat in many rooms waiting for many people to finish reading things he has written, and who has long since made peace with how long it takes. At 4:14 p.m., I signed both documents. Douglas signed as witness, affixed his notary seal, and gathered everything back into portfolio with the same steady, unhurried movements he uses for everything. He looked at me for a moment before he stood. "Effective immediately," he said. It wasn't a question. "Effective immediately." I said. He nodded. He picked up the portfolio. He said a full copy would be couriered to my home within 3 business days, and that the originals would go into his secure files. He told me to rest well. I thanked him. He left at 4:21 p.m. I sat alone in the room after that for a long time. The afternoon light was coming to the window at a low angle and turning everything in the room the color of old paper. I could hear the hallway, the ordinary continuous sound a hospital floor operated at the end of Thursday, people moving with purpose, doing their jobs, showing up. I did not feel the way I expected to feel. I did not feel righteous. I did not feel relieved exactly, though there was something close to relief in it. The specific release of a pressure you've been holding so long you stopped noticing it was there. What I felt mostly was honest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the decisions in my life were accurately reflecting the facts of my life, and that is a feeling I had forgotten I was capable of. Patricia came in at 4:52 p.m. She checked the monitor and made a note in the chart, and then looked at me. "Your guest set out?" she said. "He did," I said. She looked at the contact list on the clipboard. "Your children's names are still on here." "Leave them," I said. "If any of them call, tell them I'm resting well, and I'll be discharged Saturday morning." She wrote something small in the margin. Then she looked up at me with the steady, level expression of a woman who has seen the full spectrum of what people do to each other inside hospital rooms, and has long since decided not to judge any of it. "You have a good evening, Mr. Macon," she said. "You too, Patricia," I said, "and thank you for everything this week." She gave me a small nod, not dismissive, just a nod of a person who does not need to be thanked for doing their job well, but is not made uncomfortable by it either. And she went back to the hallway. Friday, June 20th. Renee cleared me for Saturday discharge. Raymond messaged in the group chat at 7:11 p.m. How's Dad doing? Anyone been by? Denise sent a thumbs up. Carl said he'd talked to me Wednesday, and I was doing well. The thread continued. 31 messages that week. Not one of them a phone call. To room 412. I was discharged Saturday morning, June 21st, at 9:15. A car service I have used for years. A man named Earl who drives a clean black sedan and does not make conversation unless I start it, which I did not. Picked me up at the entrance and carried my bag to the door of my house. I tipped him in cash. He said, "Good to have you home, Mr. Macon." I told him thank you and meant it. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The house was the same house it always is on a Saturday morning. Still and specific in a way that a house gets when only one person lives in it, when every object is exactly where you left it and the quiet is not absence, but simply the accurate sound of your life. I drank the coffee and looked at the backyard. The oak tree I planted in 1994, when Raymond was 11 years old, is taller than the roofline now. It will outlast the house. I find that satisfying in a way I cannot fully explain. Carl came at 2:30 p.m. He rang the doorbell, which he almost never does. I opened the door and he looked at me, at the walker I was still using for stability, at the house, at my face. And then he came in without saying anything at first, which is a Carl way. I made him coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table and talked for close to 90 minutes. He asked about the surgery, about Renee, about what the recovery looked like going forward. He asked if I needed anything around the house, groceries, yard work, anything that needed handling. I told him the yard could wait, and I had groceries enough. He asked about the hospital. I told him it had been quiet. He was quiet himself for a moment after that. "I should have come, Dad," he said. "Yes," I said. "Just that." He nodded. He turned his coffee mug in a slow circle on the table. The same habit I have, turning things in my hands when I'm thinking. We sat with it for a while. Then we talked about his foreman situation and what he was going to do about the June scheduling crunch. And I gave him my opinion on crew restructuring, and it was a good conversation. One of the better ones we've had in a while. Actually, that is something I did not expect. Something that I am still working out what to do with. Raymond came Tuesday with casserole his wife had made, chicken and wild rice, which was thoughtful and which I ate over 3 days because it was good. He said he had meant to get to the hospital, and things had gotten away from him. He said it with the easy, practiced sincerity of a man who genuinely believes a version of himself that always meant to show up. I thanked him for the casserole, and I meant that part. Denise came Thursday with flowers and a card that all 3 of them had signed. She said the month had gotten away from her. She said Marcus had been traveling. She said she was sorry. I told her I was glad she came by. I am not a man who withholds ordinary kindness. What I do is keep accurate records. None of my 3 children know about the documents that Douglas Fenn placed in front of me on the afternoon of June 19th in room 412 at Riverside Methodist Hospital. They do not know what I signed or what was changed or that any of this happened at all. And I want to be clear about why I am not going to tell them. It is not strategy. It is not punishment in the theatrical sense. The reveal, the confrontation, the moment when a man who has been underestimated finally shows his hand. I have never wanted any of that. What I wanted was for my children to come to the hospital when their father had surgery. That is the thing I wanted. It is also the thing that did not happen. The documents reflect that, quietly, permanently, and without drama. The way a structural revision reflects the actual load-bearing requirements of a building after an honest assessment. Not what the architect hoped would be true, but what the engineer determined actually was. I am not angry. I want to end on that clearly, because it matters. Anger would mean I expected something different. And I do not think I can honestly say I expected something different. I think I hoped for something different. I think I spent 4 years telling myself that the gap between what my children said and what they did was a gap I could explain away with context, with busyness, with the complicated reality of adult life. And maybe it is all of those things. People are all of those things simultaneously, busy and loving and failing and well-intentioned and absent. But I am 67 years old. I watched my wife die in the living room of this house over 7 weeks, and I did not leave her side. I did not leave it because someone put on a shared calendar. I did not leave it because it was my assigned rotation. I left it twice for 2 hours each time to pick up her medications, and I was back before she woke up. That is what I know about showing up. 11 days is not a long time. It is exactly long enough. Some things are built in a moment. Most things are built in the accumulation of ordinary days when nobody is watching and nobody is keeping score, except the people who matter most, who are always watching, always keeping score, even when they look like they aren't. 11 days of quiet, one phone call, and a document signed on a Thursday afternoon that 3 people don't know exists yet. What would you have done? Would you have waited longer? Would you have said something to them directly? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dad's Raw Revenge. I will see you on the next one.